Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight.
This is a problem of the president's own making. He's been president for 5.5 years. When's he going to take responsibility for something?
I draw but one conclusion. Barack Obama is intentionally using the immigration crisis as an excuse to change the demographics and ultimately the electorate of this nation. The latest, a Trojan horse, adding to a long line of scandals, screw-ups, shocking stupidity, or maybe shocking shrewdness. Yes, a Trojan horse, using children to advance his political party, his agenda, and his legacy. As coyotes, human smugglers hired to bring children into the United States, deliver them by the thousands with the help of Mexico, a public health danger, a law enforcement nightmare, and yet another tax burden is created courtesy of Barack Obama. Now you say, come on, these are babies. This is a humanitarian crisis. And I say, we all love babies, but most of the babies coming here are between the ages of 14 and 17. And 3/4 of those 14 to 17-year-olds are males. So much for that image of Border Patrol spending all their time changing diapers. And I've got more bad news for you. Gang signs located at the holding facilities enticed those male teens to join MS-13, one of the most violent gangs in the world. And it's no surprise, 3 weeks ago, I told you what was happening. It is the Obama administration knowingly creating a public health time bomb by sending tens of thousands of illegal immigrant children across the country with potentially dangerous infectious diseases. And now reports confirm scabies, a flesh-eating mite, tuberculosis, chickenpox, lice, foot and mouth disease, strep throat, as well as sexually transmitted diseases. And here's the good news. You ready? Our most transparent administration is shipping these kids into your state and your town with no notice under the cover of darkness, hoping you won't notice, as happened in Marietta, California. This is how it works. Each child is given a form, one easily duplicated, by the way. And according to Border Patrol, they board buses and planes, the same commercial ones that you use for your travel, courtesy of, yes, your checkbook. Now, once dropped off with virtually no supervision, they walk off. Border Patrol agents and healthcare workers report there is no testing for vaccinations or tuberculosis and say they've been threatened with arrest if they discuss the contagious diseases. They can't even take their phones into these centers for fear that they might take a picture. So why are these kids even coming here? The president says this influx is a result of the desperation and the violence that exists in Central American countries. But do we even know if these kids are from Central America? When in 2012, the United Nations reported individuals from terror-prone Somalia were traveling to Central America to illegally enter the United States. So far this year, almost 60,000 kids have entered illegally. No country in the world would allow its border to be infiltrated by people without identification who haven't even been screened. And what is the president doing to stop this, you ask? Nothing. And who is facilitating the flow of this more than 1,700-mile trek? None other than our good neighbor, Mexico. Now, you may recall then-President Felipe Calderon lecturing Congress a few years back, telling us,
"My government does not favor the breaking of the rules. I fully respect the right of any country to enact and enforce its own laws."
But then went on to say he didn't agree with the Arizona law that was just passed, to which and for which he then received a standing ovation. And guess who's shipping these kids on trains illegally in violation of our laws that they so-called respect to infiltrate our border? Mexico. For sure, these kids are not paying for that transportation as they ride on trains through Mexico. So who gives Mexico the right to ship them to us? Why aren't they keeping them or housing them? Why aren't they sending them back? And by the way, you go into Mexico illegally and see how fast your butt lands in jail. Now, our president told us that our borders were secure, as he ridiculed those who said that it wasn't.
You know, they said we needed to triple the Border Patrol. Or now they're going to say we need to quadruple the Border Patrol. Or they'll want a higher fence. Maybe they'll need a moat. Maybe they want alligators in the moat.
Funny. But you really didn't expect the truth from him, did you? In 2012, it was Barack Obama who instituted his own program that deferred deportation for kids who entered the nation illegally as long as they went to school or joined the military. And the blame is squarely on Barack Obama, because in 2011, there were 6,500 kids crossing. Then he has this program that he trumpets, and in 2013, after the program, 25,000. This year, the projection, 90,000. And next year, the projection, 145,000. That's almost 250,000 kids in 2 years, equal to the population of Orlando, Florida. And strap in, folks. Multiply that by 6 or 8, because now their parents can come with them. After all, these families deserve to be whole. Why? Any American parent who hands his kid off to a coyote, that human trafficker, to be taken 1,700 miles would be thrown in jail in this country for child abuse. And don't be fooled by this administration saying they're going to send them back. The average deportation time is 5 years. But that's only after we pay for advocates, translators, lawyers, judges, housing, food, healthcare, education, medication. And at the end, statistics tell us that 90% are released anyway. So this week, President Obama refused to go to the border to see the crisis that he created. Instead, he'd rather run off to a golf course or play pool. And in true Obama fashion, he wants $4 billion of our dollars to fix this. Only 2%, by the way, of which would go to close the border. And since nothing is his fault, he says that if only those Republicans in the Texas delegation would work with him, this could be solved. With all due respect, Mr. President, you created this mess. Now you fix it. You invited them in. Now you solve it. Take that pen and that phone of yours and make it right. The first order of government is the protection of its people. Do you really think that the drug cartels and the gangbangers and even terrorists aren't taking advantage of this migration through our wide open border? Mr. President, there's a reason we think you're the worst president in recent history. We don't trust you. We don't believe you. We don't think you're capable of leading the country. Illegally entering the United States is not a right to citizenship. And don't tell us we're heartless, because we believe in the rule of law, which is the foundation upon which our country was founded. Now, how many American children won't be able to go to school because these kids, many with communicable diseases, are in our classrooms? The American people want answers from you, Mr. President. How do you know who's from Central America and who isn't? What measures are you taking to identify diseases? How many of these teens have criminal records? Are you screening them for gang tattoos and gang affiliations? What measures are you taking to make sure that these kids are not sexually assaulted? And why are you not deploying the National Guard to the Texas-Mexico border to stop what you know is coming? Why is our Border Patrol 45 miles from the border? Once they enter the country, they're accorded constitutional rights. Why aren't you kicking them back to Mexico at the border? And why aren't you closing the border? Why? Because you have no regard for the law. You have no regard for the American people. You don't even have regard enough to see those kids who are crossing. Kind of like that night when you went to bed during the Benghazi massacre and woke up to fire up Air Force One to go to yet another fundraiser. Yes, I draw but one conclusion. It's all a Trojan horse. You remember the Trojans, they naively accepted that gift horse? It didn't work out so well for them, did it? Let's pray it works out okay for us. With me now, Congressman Louis Gohmert at the Texas border. Congressman, how are you?
Hello, Judge.
What's the situation?
As far as I know, I'm okay, but I'm brokenhearted. Well, last night was out till 2 or so on the border, and there was wave after wave after wave of people coming. And what you see, yeah, the New York Times wrote about the youngest coming across was 3 years old, unaccompanied, and you and I have both referred to the unaccompanied, but Judge, the truth is, no child comes unaccompanied. They pay drug cartels to bring them in. Why? Because this president has given the impression correctly that if you come, you get to stay. So we are luring children here through savage circumstances. Some of them get pulled off into sexual trafficking, which was the reason for the Wilberforce law, to try to avoid that. Well, now it's been used to draw more and more into sexual trafficking, human trafficking. So they come here and immediately they're expecting their rights. If you look at the $3.7 billion the president says he's got to have, hardly any of it is going to help the problem here on our border. There's even money for leadership training in there for the people who come in illegally. That way maybe they can create their own acorns, things like that. It is outrageous. Texas DPS is doing a tremendous job helping, supplementing, but that's not their job. But if you go
Texas
back to what you
DPS, the
originally
Department
said
of
in your
Public
monologue,
Safety. Yeah.
Right. We got people down there working hand in hand with Border Patrol. They're spending money, millions of dollars. They shouldn't have to. But at the very start of your monologue, fantastic, you encapsulated so much of the trouble here. But you mentioned, what some people have gotten outraged about and said, how dare you say the president wants to turn Texas blue? Well, how about because the president says he wants to turn Texas blue? Right. How about the Democrats saying they're going to turn Texas blue? At some point, I mean, you tried as a judge, circumstantial evidence case, I have. You look at the circumstances, he's doing everything he can, including luring as many millions, so far tens, hundreds of thousands. We're told there's 300,000 in the channel. And Judge, let me just mention,
hang on,
at 1:30 or so,
Congressman, we've got a break coming up. Stay with us. We're coming right back to you. And coming up, we're going to continue our coverage live from the border of the recent crisis. And vote in tonight's Insta poll. What should we do with the thousands of children that are crossing into our country? Facebook or tweet me at Judge Jeanine. Congressman Louis Gohmert back with me live from the Texas border. All right, Congressman, the president blames you and the Texas delegation for the border problems. What do you say?
Well, I'll say that the president is the source of the problems. When the president spoke up and created his own DREAM Act and said, so I've spoken it, so it shall be, it was the lure that drew people up here. There's been no spike in violence in Central America. They're coming because of the president's promises, and when they get here, they call home and say, hey, it's true. They're not sending people back. It's the president's problem alone.
Congressman, I understand that there are ads on state-run TV in Central America saying, go to America. If you're a minor, they'll take you in. They'll give you a path to citizenship. Why isn't the Obama administration doing something to counter that?
Well, they have said some things. They've made statements that they're not wanting people to come.
So then why aren't they closing the border?
I know. Well, that's the problem. They're saying it, but they're doing nothing to make that happen. They could secure that border, but those guys, those Border Patrol out there on the river, they are working as hard as anybody possibly can. But it's not just the kids coming. I was out there, there was an hour-and-a-half period where there were so many people coming that the handful is all they had available in that one spot were processing these people as this administration's requiring. And we were down there, just a few of us, and there were lookouts we ran into. Those have got to be the drug lord lookouts. There's other things than kids coming in, and this administration could stop it. But let me tell you something that hadn't been really hammered. Article 1, Section 10, when the federal government is not able or is not willing to protect from an invasion, a state has the right to reach its own agreements, levy its own taxes, and do whatever it has to secure its border from further invasion. And this is an invasion, twice as big already than D-Day and twice as many again still coming.
Oh, right. And Congressman, what do you think of the fact that the president didn't even want to visit the border but would rather play pool and says he's not into photo ops?
Well, I mean, it's consistent with his M.O. We had heard his body man say that during the Benghazi, the Bin Laden raid, that he went in and looked, and then he went and played cards, totally absent, as you pointed out, on Benghazi. So it's consistent. And really, after you make a dramatic mess and children are dying out there because you've helped lure them in, would you really want to go see that?
Well, you know, I mean, can you imagine if George Bush never went to look at Katrina? He got enough grief for being in a helicopter. Finally, talking about... Go ahead. And
Judge, actually, apparently the administration went back and was able to dig out Scott McClellan's old talking points on why the president needed to just look out from the window. I couldn't believe they were recirculating President Bush's old reasoning behind that.
All right. Congressman Gohmert, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Judge, I didn't feel like I needed to say much after your monologue. You nailed it all.
Thank you. Coming up, our border on the brink, our country at risk. And some Dems say we're not doing enough for the illegals. I take on that challenge next. A crisis on our southern border, waves of illegal immigrants posing financial, public health, and law enforcement risks to the U.S. This as graffiti litters the walls of processing centers to recruit teens for violent gangs. Where do we draw the line to protect our country? With me now, Democratic strategist Chuck Rocha. Chuck, thanks for being with us this evening. Look, no one disagrees that these children need to be treated with respect, humanely, and compassionately. I guess the issues are whether or not they really are who they say they are, and are they really fleeing a humanitarian crisis?
Well, people on the border would say that they would, from the reports that I've got from my friends there. It was so good to see Congressman Gohmert. It's so good to see my home congressman from Tyler, Texas, where I'm from. I was raised in a Baptist church there, and the good Lord speaks that we should never turn our back on children. We sing a hymn in Sunday school that said, Jesus loves all the children of the world, red or yellow, black or white. And I think that's what we stand on. I think there's two separate issues. I think there's these children, and I think there's the overarching immigration policy that we see as a failure overall right now. And there's a lot of blame to go around. But at the end of the day, we don't turn our back on children in America, and immigrants are who built this country, and I think what make us strong, because we all look different, act different, come from different places in the world, but we all are Americans and believe in our values.
Yeah, but they're not Americans, and isn't that the point? Aren't we a country of laws where people from all over the world wait to come here? They wait to get a visa. Look, when I was a judge, I used to swear in naturalized citizens who waited years to come here. Right. They learned the language. They did everything they were supposed to. And there are people saying, wait a minute, is there really a humanitarian crisis? I mean, are they really trying to escape violence in their country? Is that what this is about?
I think the stories along the border that you hear of a woman who talked about her husband, who was a policeman, who was trying to clean up their neighborhood, who got murdered, and her children were being forced into the gangs. And we know as parents that the last thing you want to do is give your children to a coyote to go across the border. And if you're going to do that, that's the last resort. And so if they come in thinking that they're going to be killed, we should take them in and then follow the rule of the law, which says that we have to process these children, interview them, hence Obama asking for the $3.8 billion. But because we want to follow the letter of the law.
Okay, but I want you to look at this recent study by, I believe it's a Latin American public opinion project, which says that the perception of crime victimization in Central America by Central Americans is that crime has dropped. So why, if crime has dropped, are we now saying it's so bad there, they're coming over now? Aren't they being lured by what happened with President Obama in 2012?
I think that they're not, and this is the reason I say that, is because I've got a son who's grown now, and I know the last thing that I would want to do is give my son to anybody to trust to go across the border. And I do politics. I see polls all the time, and I know that polls can be manipulated to say whatever you want them to say. I don't think a parent, whether they were a father or a mother, would turn their child, whether they were 14 or 15 or 3 or 4, over to somebody else.
But that's you and that's me. If that child is the bootstrap to get into the United States and all of the benefits, then, you know, why wouldn't we, you know, why do we assume that that's the reason? Because you or I would only do it that way.
I still think that there is a moral code that America has stand on, and that we're built on a system of values that we go by, and I think that that's the reason that we would do this. I don't really think that people are coming here to gauge the system. And I think that the same amount of Mexican immigrants who come every day, 18,000 a month, that are turned around within 72 hours.
So let me ask you this. Why is Mexico allowing and facilitating the movement of these kids? Why isn't Mexico taking care of them? Why isn't Mexico feeding them and housing them? Why is Mexico just shoving them off to us?
There's a reason why Mexico's not the #1 nation in the world, and America is. Why we're the beacon of hope everywhere you go. People want to come here and start entrepreneurship.
I agree with you, absolutely.
And be proud Americans.
But what about all the other people who are in the middle of wars, who are trying to come here, who are being killed, whose countries are being destroyed? There are caliphates being created.
We welcome them every day.
No, we don't.
Absolutely.
They have to wait in line.
Florida,
let's talk about the Middle East.
Citizen.
Let's talk about Europe. Let's talk about Russia. Let's talk.
You can't have it both ways.
They're people.
Absolutely, and they're hurting.
all people.
The one thing,
you know what?
The Americans.
Here's the thing. Who should pay for this?
Absolutely. I'm willing to pay for it every single day, because my parents came here and paid for it, and my grandparents did.
Did your parents come here legally?
My grandparents did.
Good, and so did mine. And therein lies the rub. Thank you, Chuck Rocha, for being here. We're going to bring you back. All right, coming up, violent MS-13 gang members infiltrating the border. And in case you didn't know it, initiation into the gang includes a few rapes and a murder. A Border Patrol agent's frightening account. And in a Justice exclusive, one congressman fought the Obama administration's shroud of secrecy. His firsthand account since gaining entry to a facility housing these illegal children. Next. I'm telling you, your safety is at risk and you are in danger. Violent MS-13 gangs are crossing the border, and get this, they're recruiting new gang members from the illegal kids that we are housing. With me now, Chris Cabrera, the Vice President of National Border Patrol Council. Good evening, Chris. How do we know, one, whether the kids coming in aren't already gang members, and two, that they are recruiting for new gang members?
Yes, Judge. How are you this evening?
Good, thanks.
We do know that they're coming in as gang members. We do interview them, and a lot of times they're proud of what they're doing and proud of what they are and their gang ties. And usually the gang tattoos are a dead giveaway. Some of these tattoos are very flashy, very gaudy on their neck and on their face. And when they're questioned, they'll readily admit that they are part of either an MS-13 or an MS-18 gang.
All right, Chris, let me ask you this. Is there any way to categorize or create some kind of file that identifies the name of an individual and the location of tattoos? I mean, I know when I was a DA, well, I had a whole intel center where, you know, if someone said the person who raped me had this tattoo, we were able to use that as part of the identification of criminals.
Yes, we do have gang units. They do document. However, with these juveniles, they seem to be in a different category, and a lot of them are being released into the United States. And even though they will be documented as a gang member in their file, at the end of the day, we're still releasing them, and some of them with criminal histories back in their home country. Unfortunately, that's not enough. If they don't have a criminal history here in the United States, we're going ahead and letting them walk out the door. Let
me ask you this, Chris. When you say criminal histories in their own country, we're not actually fingerprinting and then calling El Salvador or Honduras or Guatemala and saying, hey, you know, John Smith, does he have a criminal record? We're not even checking that, are we?
No, we're not.
Of course not.
The ones that we're finding with, the ones that we're finding with the criminal history is through self-admission. We had one not too long ago that said that he participated in 2 murders. Another one said that he participated in a couple attempted murders, drug dealing, that kind of stuff.
Chris, you know, you say, look, when you hear these gang members say this stuff, they're just processed, all right? But are there any efforts in place to crack down on this?
Unfortunately, no. You know, right now we're still in the at the building stage of these detention centers, and once we get them in place, right now they're struggling just to get the centers up and running with hot water, with accommodations, with food, and they haven't even gotten that far in advance for segregation units just for the known gang members, and which puts them in with other kids that are vulnerable to this mentality.
And so these gang members, they're being shipped to other parts of the country, as we've heard, up to Virginia, Massachusetts, New York, California, Texas, Arizona?
Yes, they'll go to different detention centers based on what their needs are, where they're going to ultimately be reunited with their families, and they're going to get processed, and then they go to detention center, and 9 times out of 10 they're released. When you say reuniting with their families, a lot of them, their families are home, and they're the ones who sent them here. Yeah, unfortunately, you know, that's what happens. Some of them are coming to reunite with some type of family, whether it's mother, father, or sometimes an uncle or a cousin living somewhere in the United States, and they're making the trip on their own. A lot of them, you know, these gang members from 10, 12 years on old, 10 or 12 years old on up. All right. Chris Cabrera, thanks so much for being with us this evening. All right, thank you, Judge. All right. First, Senator John McCain and then Congressman Jim Bridenstine say they were blocked by the most transparent administration in history from seeing the flood of illegal immigrant children. Congressman Bridenstine finally got it, and he joins me now. All right, good evening, Congressman. You just got in a few hours ago to one of these facilities. Tell us what you saw.
Well, I'll be very frank. My concerns were validated. A lot of these children have been abused. A lot of these children have been trafficked. Those reports are absolutely true. That's been validated. And of course, when you talk about the human tragedy here, that's a big piece of it. There are deaths in northern Mexico as a direct result of the human trafficking. And there's another big problem here that I think a lot of people are not talking about, and that is the children that are at these facilities. Who are they being released to? And that was eye-opening for me as well.
Who are they being released to?
In many cases, they're being released to other illegal aliens in our country, which, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to do a criminal background check on illegal aliens in our country. So without that kind of verification process, they're relying on simply asking questions and self-reporting. Just as your previous guest indicated, they need to self-report in order to know what's happening here. And in many cases, these children are being released to people that we really don't have full knowledge of who they are and what their background is.
All right. Now, the administration refused to let you and Senator McCain go into these places. We're hearing that the doctors and healthcare workers can't even take their phones in. I mean, we're hearing about diseases. You have confirmed that these kids are just, a lot of them are being let out after a period of time. We forget the fact that we're paying for all this, but what did you see? I mean, did you see evidence of diseases in there? I mean, we're hearing about lice on these kids.
Sure. Well, when I was in there, it was very clear that they are very well staffed from a medical perspective, and of course that's for a reason. There were, of course, I went through the medical facility, and there were in that medical facility boards that indicated how many cases of which kind of diseases there were that had come through there. So yes, I can tell you that there were children in there that had different types of diseases, and certainly the medical staff is working very diligently. I want to be clear on this fact, though. The professionals that are working inside that facility are working very hard to make sure that the children are cared for, that these diseases are being taken care of. They're very professional. They are very courteous. They're doing the right thing. The big crisis here is the national security and the national sovereignty of our country, as you've indicated. You had a guest on earlier, Chuck Rocha, and he was doing what Democrats usually do. They try to confuse the issue. there are two separate issues here. One is border security, which requires, that's for our national sovereignty and our national security. A whole separate issue is immigration reform. That's different. And overwhelmingly, we hear from our Democratic friends that this is an immigration issue. This is a national sovereignty and a national security issue. We need to address it by enforcing the law. The 2006 Secure Fence Act requires 100% operational control of the southern border.
Look,
right
the
now
president,
we only have 44%.
Congressman, you know what? We don't have to dance around this. The president wants $3.7 billion. 2% of that is for Border Patrol. He expects $150,000 next year, but isn't doing anything to stop it. What does that tell you? Knowing that there are criminals coming in, we can't confirm who they are. We've got our national security at risk. We know they've got diseases based on what you're telling us. What is the president's agenda here?
Well, here's what we know. We know what will secure the southern border. They've done it in San Diego. It requires a double-layer fence. It requires technology with sensors, and it requires rapid response teams. In San Diego, they reduced illegal immigration by over 90%.
Congressman, I don't mean to interrupt you. I don't have a lot of time. We know what we need to do. Why won't the president do it?
This is the challenge that all of us have to come to grips with. We all agree we need to secure the southern border. Unfortunately, one party wants to hold it hostage for a larger political agenda.
Or hold it open so that they make sure that President Obama changes the demographics of this country. Congressman Bridenstine, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. And coming up, shocking reports of medical staff threatened to keep their mouths shut about illegals with contagious diseases. The public health crisis you need to know about next. Tonight, reports say medical staff are told to keep their mouths shut about illegals flooding our country with contagious diseases or face arrest. This, as the situation at our border and at facilities all over the country continues to deteriorate. With me now, the former director of the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, Dr. Elizabeth Valide, who practices in Arizona and Texas. All right, good evening, doctor. What do you know of these kids walking around with dangerous communicable diseases?
Good evening, Judge. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for addressing such a critical issue. We know from the reports from the Border Patrol that there's a high incidence of tuberculosis, of swine flu, chickenpox, measles, scabies, lice, many contagious diseases that are coming as invisible carriers with the people coming across the border now.
All right, but the role of the CDC, aren't they supposed to be telling us this so that we can prepare for this?
Yes, in my medical career, I have not seen the CDC be so strangely silent. Texas Department of Health and Public Health has actually sent out multiple alerts. I had 3 alerts just in one afternoon this past week. Arizona Public Health has been strangely silent as well, and yet my information comes from the Border Patrol. I received a copy of the union letter warning the Border Patrol agents of what they needed to do to reduce their risk, which I commend them for doing, but yet we're not hearing from the officials that are charged with the health and safety of the American public.
Are we facing a full-on public health crisis now, doctor?
Well, in my opinion, yes. I've spent the last 5 years doing medical projects in Central America and South America. In fact, I was only recently back from South America. And one of the things that's quite staggering is the fact that 75% of these illegal border crossers now are coming from countries other than Mexico, countries that have a high incidence of drug-resistant tuberculosis that is well known in Central America and South America. So we are seeing a new disease pattern. We're getting into the incubation period, beginning to run out. School is starting in a few weeks in Texas and Arizona, certainly. So you have crowded conditions, hot, humid conditions, unsanitary conditions, and you have people that are carriers of bacteria and virus and the other contagious diseases that have been reported. We already have Border Patrol agents that have tested positive for tuberculosis, and this is not a simple matter.
What is your reaction to reports, Doctor, that the medical staff are being threatened not to speak out about the concerns?
I'm absolutely shocked. I've never encountered anything like that in my entire career. And not only that, people have said, well, it's a HIPAA violation. It's not a HIPAA violation. Doctors and nurses have a responsibility to help educate the public about health risk. We don't violate HIPAA as long as we don't reveal an individual patient's name.
All right. All right, Doctor, I'm sorry we don't have more time. Thank you so much. With school starting, this is going to be a nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and coming up, jihadists at the border, why the president needs to address this national security threat before it's too late. And it's your last chance to vote in tonight's Instapoll. What should we do with the thousands of children crossing into our country? Facebook or tweet me at Judge Jeanine. New fears tonight that the breakdown at the border is exactly what ISIS and other violent extremists have been waiting for. The chaos creates the perfect cover for these operatives to sneak sleeper cells into the United States. Might they already be here? With me now, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear Forces in the Reagan administration and President of the Center for Security Policy, my friend Frank Gaffney. Good evening, Frank.
Good evening, Judge.
You know, Frank, you are an expert on what is going on in the Middle East. You know, ISIS, the caliphate, and their attempt to literally regionalize their organization and to eliminate national borders. Do you believe that, given what's going on in our southern border, on our border, that we are at risk by those people?
Well, I actually consider this to be a global jihad, a part of, if you will, the war for the free world. I really think that's what's at stake, is freedom more generally, not just in regions, as you say, of the Middle East, but worldwide, and including here. And I think there's no question that what we're seeing is growing evidence that enemies of this country who have a shared goal, namely the imposition of Sharia and its rule according to Sharia by a caliphate, whether they're organized or flying the banner of the Islamic State, whether they're Al-Qaeda, whether they're Hamas, whether they're Hezbollah, whether they're the Taliban, they all agree that this is, in fact, their purpose. Even the Iranians, who have differences on some points of Islam, all are agreed that Sharia is the way. And I think they are, in fact, exploiting the porousness of our borders. They are, in fact, here in places, at very least, some sleeper cells have been identified, and more are almost certainly on their way.
Well, you know, reports this week say that ISIS militants seized nuclear materials in Iraq. Your reaction to that?
Well, it was nuclear materials in Iraq this week. It was a chemical weapons facility the last week. They were parading around a Scud missile recently as well. They are, in short, now acquiring basically the means for mass destruction of various kinds. And unfortunately, when you compound that with what Iran is also acquiring in that regard, what Syria and other nations have that have the potential to fall into bad guys' hands, including Hezbollah's, you really see this problem metastasizing, and it is a threat. Just as in your previous segment, you made the point, Judge, and in your opening, there is a threat to the public safety of the American people as well as the national security, and I'm really appalled that the Obama administration is actually exacerbating this problem rather than protecting us against them.
You know, Frank, I think it's very interesting that, if you recall, right after Benghazi, the Obama administration went out and bought advertisements to apologize to the Muslim world for a video that had nothing to do with anything that we paid for, meaning the advertisement. You would think that they would do the same thing in Central America, saying, even though we said that the kids who are here illegally are, you know, we're going to give them citizenship, don't come over here. I mean, why do you think he's doing this to us?
My personal assessment of it, Judge, is that this is part of the administration's plan.
To do what?
I think that they have sought to bring more illegal aliens into this country. I think they are considering them incipient Democratic voters. I think that they believe that to the extent that they can intensify the pressure from such influxes of illegal aliens, they can have their way with the Congress, whether it's the $4 billion that they're asking for now, or maybe comprehensive immigration reform. In any way, I think their purpose ultimately is a wrecking operation on the republic that we love. And I think this is only one aspect of it, but a particularly insidious one.
Well, you know, it's really a shame because it's not just changing the demographics. I mean, we're talking public health issues as well. Frank Gaffney, always good to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you, man. Good to talk with you.
Now it's time for the result of our Insta poll. We asked, what should we do with the thousands of children crossing into this country? Jeff says, send them to the White House. Cynthia, take them to Nancy Pelosi's house. She said she wished she could take them all. Mark says, give them a pamphlet of information on how to come here illegally to read on the bus ride.